Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Information Week webinar, 2023 Predictions for the IT Service Desk, sponsored by TeamDynamix and broadcast by Informa. I'm Michael Krieger with Information Week, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that will take place at the end of our presentation. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides via the resources widget. And towards the end of our webinar, we'll ask you to provide feedback via the survey widget found at the bottom of your screen. Please take a minute to fill out the survey before you leave us, as your feedback gives us valuable information on how we can improve future events. And lastly, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the Help widget found at the bottom of your screen or type your issue into the Q&A area, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Now, on to the presentation, 2023 Predictions for the IT Service Desk. Discussing today's topic is Andrew Graf, Chief Product Officer at TeamDynamix, Mark Dittenberg, Director of Information Technology at Nutrabolt, and Roger Estrada, Vice President of Process Excellence at Front Wave Credit Union. If you want to learn more about any of our speakers, you can find their bios in the speaker bio box on your screen. And again, if you want to ask our speakers any questions, please use the Q&A box that's also on the right side of your screen. Andrew, Mark, and Roger, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to be here with Mark, you, and Roger, and we'll get to explore your expertise on some of the trends, I think, that we're going to be experiencing here in 2023 and beyond. So, what we're seeing in the market is just incredible demands upon IT, and that we're seeing IT organizations stretch thin. We're seeing demands increase from the number of applications that IT is supporting, point applications. The cloud has increased that, remote work. I mean, I think that's been the perfect storm of a tight labor market and just a massive transformation of the business with all sorts of solutions flying your way. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to dive into a handful of questions, and we'll talk about the topic, and then I want to get your input and have you weigh in from your vantage point on these particular questions. So with that, I want to go ahead and take a look at the first part of our study. And let me go ahead and advance here. Okay. And what we found really interesting was that with this, when we looked at the top challenges, there were three that really stood out. And the first was that there was a heavy reliance on IT to administer the systems across the ecosystem. So, whether it was something that IT implemented or something a department implemented and then expected IT to support, that admin heavy tech was a real burden. The second was that there was a lot of manual processing. So the kinds of things that you might find that some organizations automate, it wasn't happening in many cases. There's lots of activities that our clients define as mundane or toil, which I really like. I think that frames it up pretty well, that could be automated that aren't. And then the third is just more reliance on workflow. And I think the theme is, how do we free resources to do valuable work when we are resource constrained? As we look at that, I think that's overall what we took away from it. Now, I want to turn it back to you, and Roger, let's start with you. So when you're thinking about 2023 and thinking about some of the challenges you're facing, what are your key initiatives? What are you going to focus on in the realm of IT service management?
For me, we've been live on a new system here for about a year, and for me, my biggest initiative is to continue building out all of the workflows so that we're getting the proper approvals for auditing, that we know that what we're doing and what we're implementing for any user, whatever the service is, that it's correct and it's right the first time, so that they have an easy way to request service and we have an easy way to deliver it as quickly as possible. That is still our, number one goal.
Are there specific services where you'll feel as though when you have the solution in place, it's going to add more value than others? Or is there a squeaky wheel that you're looking to address that's really draining resources, or a handful?
For us, our biggest thing, we're in a growth mode. So onboarding a user is the most involved process that we have, and it's the one that's taking up everybody's time, because the growth is substantial here. So, that's the one that anything I can do to streamline that process and automate it, I'm looking for it.
And you know what, that is a really common pain point. And the same on the other opposite end of that is offboarding. We're finding that to be one of the biggest opportunities to save time, not just in IT, because it transcends so many departments. That's something we see too. Roger, how about you and your organization?
In our organization, we have three main strategic objectives. A high-performing culture, but feeding into the IT service management is, operational excellence and being digital first. And, when it comes to that IT service management, it begins with being hyper-focused on operationally being excellent, really reviewing our processes, ensuring that, we don't have any non-value added steps in there, and, creating a process that allows us to meet those needs and meet those demands. So that's really our focus. I mean, similar to others, we're in a growth mode. We're building out. We have quite a bit of competing priorities. So really understanding what our workflow is and being really great at what we do, from an IT service management perspective, and just across the board, that's very important to us. So that's our main focus.
And Roger, are there very specific areas where you're starting? Mark had mentioned onboarding is something that was a significant drain on resources, and also maybe considered that mundane work and the toil. Is there anything in your organization that you're focused on where you think you're going to get a lot of value?
I would say onboarding is definitely something. Competing priorities with just, we have a small IT group. We're trying to build it out. So, really understanding what that flow is and what are competing priorities, and making sure that we can still deliver to our customers while working on other IT related needs. I mean, it really is a lot of pieces to the puzzle here, but excuse me. So yes, definitely onboarding is definitely one of them for sure.
Okay, well, great. Well, I think you've both teed up a question later here in the presentation, so I'm really excited about it, and that worked out really well for us. So moving to another piece of research that we did in hand with Informatech. When we think about the most critical trends, the first was digital transformation, meaning how are we being digital first? Roger, to use your terms, how are we automating our workflows for business processes? The second was thinking about enterprise service management. So I think what we saw is that obviously IT is a service-centric organization, but so are lots of other departments within the organization. And a lot of those other departments are inefficient, so there's a lot of value. But what we're also finding is a lot of those departments, when they're trying to manage service or requests, drain IT's resources. So I think most of us can think about where we might have web forms that we built as IT, where demand flows in. Well, if they need a change, IT has to do that. Right? IT has to administer maybe the back-end system. So we saw that as a big trend to try to move these departments to a more scalable and easier to maintain solution that maybe even the department can maintain themselves. The third really was looking at work holistically. So, so many people in the organization, aside from a pure service management agent or a pure project manager, do a lot of things. We wear lots of hats. Our clients are working on a project. They are helping to tier-end troubleshooting, right? They have operational responsibilities. So trying to consolidate that view of work is another big trend that we saw to help better, again, use our resources and give management a better perspective on how to schedule resources and remove roadblocks. So the next question we have and Roger, we'll start with you, is how are you managing the increase in demand, that tsunami of demand? Both of you are in growing organizations, right? That's compounded with all the influx of new solutions and the changing user expectations. I mean, it's really kind of a hornet's nest to manage for you and your team. So how are you doing it?
Well, to your point, I mean, it is a lot of demand. We are resource constrained at times. So it's interesting. In my organization, we've dubbed 2023 as the year of the process. And that's where we're really focused on. We're meeting this, increased demand by restructuring what we do, restructuring our processes to be scalable, creating better escalation paths, providing, self-service opportunities for people within our organization, prioritizing requests during set criteria such as business value and other needs. But it really begins, for us at least, with truly understanding every aspect of our value stream and the overall service flow. And so listening to the voice of the process, understanding, gathering data internally, even externally for our customers, it's really valuable to us. And that's part, again, as I mentioned before, the digital first, really leveraging our analytics and understanding how we can meet that demand.
I love the 2023 theme of the year of the process. So another follow-on question for you, right? So I'm sure that there are more opportunities to improve process than you could possibly get to in 2023. How did you prioritize? How did you decide what the top 3 things you were going to focus on from a process perspective were?
Yeah, we're listening very much to our members. We're listening to our NPS scores. We're listening to our CES scores, really trying to understand, from a member standpoint, how easy it is to transact with us, to make sure that we are delivering those services. And then just overall survey scores to understand, where we can better improve. I mean, we're focusing, and that's one of the things I'm talking to our executive team about, is focus on the business value, focus on, that's where we're going to prioritize on, because we are in a growth mode and we want to make sure that we are scalable across the board at what we're trying to do. But it's mainly, like I say, listening not only to our customers, but like I said, the voice of the process, that tells us quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, how about Nutribol?
I was in a unique position that I came in and somewhat had a green field to kind of start fresh. So every process for IT, I've been able to start, if it wasn't approved by me, then we're not doing it the old way. We do it the new way and the way, that it should be done today, as opposed to holding on to, well, we've done this for 5 years. So I've been real lucky to be able to do that. We take every request that comes in. We've got a generic request form, and we start looking at those and saying, okay, what's the process really need to be? And then we build it out. We build it out the right way so that we're getting the information we need. We're getting the, from the users, and that we're able to deliver that stuff quickly. If I'm not going to use data, if I don't have the use for it within the next year, 18 months, I'm not collecting it. We're keeping those processes as lean as we can, with the idea that one day we'll be able to automate stuff. Mm-hmm. That's really the goal. And there's, onboarding, right? IT's got a bunch of systems. We got to provision rights. We got to do stuff. And then across the business, there's a bunch of other systems that people need access to. And we're always trying to coordinate this, that, or the other. And, I'm looking at bringing in and creating a small group that would manage all access requests across all systems, not only just from a usability standpoint, but also helps from a security aspect as well, and that, offboarding of users as well.
So your focus on managing your resource capacity is more on process as well. So making sure that it's well-oiled machine. There's not a lot of waste in those systems.
Yep.
Okay, great, very interesting. So the next thing we want to discuss is self-service. One of the biggest opportunities for driving down the actual demand that an individual has to address is by allowing customers to self-serve, whether that's an answer to something or making a request where they don't have to talk to somebody. And now, I think self-service sometimes gets a negative connotation when it's taken to the extreme. I mean, there are certainly interactions where you want a person working with a person, but there are also certain interactions where even the customer doesn't want to have to talk to anyone, right? If they can answer their own question, they're very happy about that. And I think finding that balance has been something that's a challenge in this industry. Now, what's interesting in this research, what we found was that only about 25% of the participants thought that they had a highly evolved portal. And the rest were some variation of not being that effectively used or not effectively used at all. And when you think about a self-service portal, that is sort of the foundation of content to answer questions. Now, how you extend that portal, there's lots of different ways, right? It can be extended through an actual web portal where somebody's going to a URL answering questions. That content can be indexable via Google. So when somebody searches Nutrable PC problem, they should find the resources they need to fix that. There's also other extensions through things like conversational AI, but the foundation of knowledge to answer questions and about our services is typically contained in this portal. So I thought this was really interesting to look at what percentage of organizations thought they were doing a good job, and it wasn't very high, which is, I think, great news, because that means there's ways to improve it. So the question here is, what are you doing from a self-service perspective? How are you approaching it? Roger, why don't we start with you?
Sure. No, I think the key to providing exceptional self-service, getting people to adopt it, starts with being proactive and anticipating the needs of the user. It starts with having a strong, robust technology platform. Either you're leveraging AI, machine learning, any other analytics, and then building out that portal for a set of, with a set of tools that allows users to find what they need with minimal effort, and yet still provide a great experience, because I do think that at times self-service can be, labeled as cumbersome or just get me the information I need kind of thing. And so you want to facilitate that as much as possible, creating a knowledge base. I think also teaching your customers as much as they can about the product, providing product training, guides, or whatever else you can in anticipation of these type of questions for that self-service, and then automation. But of course, having flexible automation is part of that. But of course, if self-service doesn't work, having a very smooth escalation path for the customer is also very important as well.
Yeah. Mark, how are you approaching self-service?
Yeah, this is one area that, we're still working as we build out our knowledge base and stuff. It certainly was from a technical perspective and not really from an end user perspective. Mm-hmm. Starting to slowly make that transition so that there are useful knowledge base articles to end users. And then our processes, the other piece has really helped us, and there's still some manual stuff from a technical side, but as we put in a MDM solution for all of our laptops and devices, there are certain things that people can go in and request very easily. We still get the request and got to do a little bit of manual stuff in the background, but I think at some point in time we'll be able to automate that. So if somebody needs, a full version of Adobe Acrobat, they can go in, put the request in, get the appropriate approvals, and it'll just be installed on their machine. That's really what I'm looking at, the future for. Is I want it to be that easy to where we don't even have to get involved. There's still a little bit, behind the curtains, but, that's been the goal.
Yep. Great. So, when we think about the self-service portal, there's been a couple key elements or attributes of what we've seen in the market as the most effective client portals. And we have the benefit of working with hundreds and hundreds of organizations and being able to look at a cross-section of usage and then determine what are the discerning factors between the best portals and others. And it really boils down to a few things. The first is that the content has to be easy to navigate and search. So what we have found is that not only does the portal have to have very powerful search, an intuitive search and an intuitive layout, but it also, like I said, needs to be searchable via Google, because that's where people start, and that content should be available. The second component of that is accessibility. So how easy is this to use for people who have disabilities? Now, you might think, well, I don't know what percentage of my customers have disabilities. If you're in the public sector, you're in education, or you're in any industry where you're serving a lot of consumers, this becomes important. And there's been plenty of class action lawsuits in the last 4 or 5 years against organizations that don't provide accessible technology. So it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also a good risk mitigator as well. The other component is the best organizations continually incorporate feedback. Roger, like you had mentioned, whether you're using CSAT or MPS score or many other types of surveys to figure out what's working, what isn't, even at the article level. Is this helpful? That simple question, right, is very powerful. And then also they have to be easy to build. So we are finding that the organizations who make best use of it, there isn't an encumbrance when it comes to adding content, redesigning, building. It has to be very simple, even for people who have no IT background. So we're seeing as portals, self-service portals expand beyond IT, there's lots of parts of the organization that want to provide self-service, HR, marketing, legal, right? But they don't have programming skills and they're not necessarily technical. So when you're looking at solutions, one of the winning factors that we've seen is, hey, make it easy for someone with a non-IT background to build and add content. Right? They shouldn't have to rely on IT to do that work. So those are some of the main things we see. And as I was mentioning, we're seeing this proliferation beyond the boundaries of IT because there is so much demand in organizations. IT is typically one of the first areas to push self-service. IT obviously is a very service-centric organization, but then that cascades. Remember that earlier slide where we talked about some of the biggest trends. Enterprise service management, or expansion into lots of different departments, is one of the big pushes. And when we think about it, right, all these different organizations provide service, they have projects. It's just a little bit different than IT. And we're finding that to be successful with this, the solutions provided can't be IT language. So if human resources wants to use a service management solution, they don't want to have to tackle the verbiage of incident problem change. They want case, right, as an example. And so the solutions need to be easy to build out for those organizations. And by the way, a good solution in this space doesn't require IT to maintain it. So when we need a field added to a form, we need a change to a business process, those departments don't need to call IT and add to their burden. You know, one of the biggest hesitations we've seen in the market for spreading service management is that demand. So IT looks at it and says, well, if I roll out another department, then we all of a sudden have to support that department. So solutions that allow IT to be more hands-off have been very successful there. So switching a little bit to automation, again, we've talked about this. We saw it in some of the trends, workflow automation. You know, Mark, you mentioned building your processes to then automate. As we think about automation, this is one of the most interesting parts of the research that we found here with Information Week. 52% of the respondents were spending over 5 hours a week on activities that could be automated. Right? Now, if you think about 5 hours a week, you say, oh, okay, well, I've got, 40 hours total, and you start looking at it. When you start adding it up, that's 6.5 weeks a year of people working on mundane toil type tasks that could be freed up. We had lots of people in the survey who were at 10 hours. That's 13 weeks of time. So we're seeing automation being viewed as a tool to add resource capacity, not just provide a better experience, but actually add back a fair amount of capacity. And what do you do with that capacity, right? In the most common scenario, what happens is now these resources are able to respond faster to higher priority items. They're able to be more thorough with the activities that require a person to work with a person. And overall, it raises satisfaction. So that mundane toil where someone really doesn't want to have to talk to somebody, think name changes, group permissions, permission changes in Active Directory, right? Some of that onboarding work, no one's missing that. And customers we have found aren't really dying to talk to somebody about it either. But there are plenty of activities where they do want to talk to somebody more quickly and for that service to be more thorough. So I thought this was really, really astounding. So turning it back over to you, Mark, when you think about automation and workflow, what are the key initiatives? What is your strategy around what you'd like to automate?
We've been looking at this, and it's really that onboarding. We've got, beside the hardware piece that needs to happen, you got, hardware that needs to be provisioned for a user. But depending on the role of the person, we've got no less than probably 10, 12 systems that possibly somebody would have to be provisioned to. Mm-hmm. And, when you got to create an account and do all those things, that's a lot of work in the morning, Yeah. If we can automate that, I know I can reduce people's time greatly. We've done a lot of work on the hardware side with putting in an MDM, and we're provisioning, as we provision systems, they're getting applications installed automatically. Now we need to come back to the account and access side, and we should be able to add an account and know that it's got the right permissions and stuff without having to touch stuff ourselves. That's the biggest goal I've got with the team for automation. If we do that, everything else is also easier. Our most complex process is onboarding with all the systems that we have to get involved in. If we can do that right, everything else is cake.
Yep. I know. What's really interesting too, we did a bit of research around onboarding because that was a common refrain we heard from across our customer base. And once we dug into it, it turned out that it was really common for organizations to spend more than 35 hours across all the different people doing work, trying to get the organization ready for somebody to start. That has to do with telephony, that has hardware, software. That's a lot of time. Right? And so automating that is a significant opportunity. Roger, I'm going to turn this over to you. What about your strategy towards workflow and automation? How are you viewing this? What's the low-hanging fruit for you?
Well, it's interesting. Your data that you showed on the previous slide was, it really spoke to me. It really, we're experiencing the exact same thing. We are seeing that there's a lot of manual processes that kind of cause a drain, and if we introduce some automation, we would glean some results from that, or some benefits from that. So, yeah, no, our focus on automation, definitely from the IT side, there's quite a bit. Like the common theme here is onboarding, like you had mentioned. Just overall, I think a lot of our IT is loaded down with a lot of service tickets and things like that. We're really focusing on looking things from the operational layer first, really doing the process improvement like I was talking about earlier, and then putting, really understanding what we do and how to do it better, but then putting the technology layer on top, which is the automation that you're talking about, and, really focusing on, we have another term, ease of doing business, and how quicker and easier can we do this, and again, that ties into the automation. We're also finding it's important for us to really understand the tools and how they connect with each other. So again, connecting systems together through APIs and things like that, and really leveraging other middleware tools that we can to help that synergy between platforms. And then we're also exploring robotic process automation in different areas as well. So definitely, like I said, beginning with the operational layer and making sure that we're as lean as possible, but then optimizing on top of that.
Great. As we think about automation, we really look at this as a game changer And what we saw across our customer base constantly was all these opportunities for automation and integration. And when we think about it, we're seeing organizations look at their ticket volume, study, right? What are the highest volume activities that could be automated, starting there? Password resets, permission changes, name changes. I mentioned many of those earlier, but those are significant typically when they're added up. So when you think about automation, think about all the systems you might involve in a process, and then think about how do we connect them, right? How do I automate this? Now, almost all systems have APIs today, or if you're on-prem, you can go to a database. But that typically requires a deep technical skill set. And there are a handful of people in an organization who can actually do those things. And their capacity is terrible typically. I mean, they have 16 to 24 month backlogs in many cases. If you think about the people who build integrations and automations in your organization, it's usually small. So what we're seeing as a huge trend is a move towards integration and automation platforms where you don't need to know XML. You don't need to know JSON, right? You don't need to have a developer's background. You just have to have a business analyst background and familiarity with being a sysadmin to build automations and integrations and be able to troubleshoot them as well. So if we think about expanding the community of integrators and automators, that has added a lot of value across the industry. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of growth in our business because, Roger, like you, we listen to our customers very closely, and this is a significant area of demand. So when you're thinking about these solutions and you think about your core skill sets internally, if you think, wow, our integrators and automators are buried, right? Those who know how to write scripts, SQL statements, right? They know JavaScript, they know Python, they know all the different systems we integrate with. That's usually a small community. So the advent of integration automation platforms has been a significant change in the last few years, or at least the rate of adoption has increased quite a bit. So as a follow-on, Roger, you had mentioned digital first. And we talk a lot about digital transformation or hear a lot about it from our customer base. Tell me about what are some of the things you're doing to be digital first, right? Or that digital transformation? What are the main strategies and tactics you're deploying?
Well, the main thing for us is we wanted to redefine our business strategy and our culture to be, like I say, digital first. And one of those things, we are, leveraging our data warehouse more. We created a data analytics strategy. We're implementing new tools to what we offer our customers across the board. We are implementing those right now that are really listening to the demand, giving us the analytics that we can do to react to a changing market. Credit unions, we have a lot. We have to listen to the economy and the market of what's going on out there. And then that just gives us greater insight into the products and services that are out there. And so a lot of it is leveraged in data analytics and really understanding our customer base.
Great. Mark, how about you? From a digital transformation standpoint, what are you doing in 2023, or just from a modernization perspective? What are your big initiatives?
Yeah, I think mine echoes Robert's a little bit as well. I've got a big SQL Server environment. Over the years, it's grown outward and upward. Mm-hmm. It's massive. So I also have the glorious task of re-architecting that entire environment in the cloud. We're going to take advantage of native cloud technologies for database work, SQL, and or BI or whatever. So we're looking at that now. Ties into, I want to get out of the hardware business. I've still got a data center with the hardware, and for where we really want to be, I don't want to be in the hardware business long term. So there's a lot tied into that, and then from an end user perspective, some things have happened actually very organically here when everybody went remote. People started using Teams. they're using team sites and SharePoint sites for sharing of team data. They can add users to their team and share documents at will. I want to get rid of, I don't know if I'll fully get rid of it, but I want to, lessen the reliance on that corporate file server. And people are using Teams and or SharePoint sites, whatever it is, so they have control over who they share data with and who they, let in, as opposed to coming, hey, I got to put in a service request so I can be added to this group so I can have access to, my Teams files on a, file server or whatever it is. So been a little lucky that, some of that stuff has kind of happened naturally with, everybody going remote, and our company, is scattered around anyway. We're, we've got people all over, but I've still got a lot of old stuff, all that legacy stuff that's still being used. And, I've got to figure out some strategies for that.
So if you had a magic wand, you can get rid of one old piece of legacy technology or devices, what would it be? This is always a great question.
I would get rid of on-premise Active Directory.
Got a lot of there's a lot of nodding heads out there. A lot of nodding heads. Well, great. Well, I think we have time for some questions. So I'll pass it back to our moderator, Michael.
Thanks so much. And great conversation, by the way, gentlemen. Thank you for that. But before we get into the Q&A, I'd like you to direct your attention to our webinar survey available on the bottom of your presentation window. And thank you all in advance for filling out the feedback form. Your participation in the survey allows us to better serve you. Okay, now on to our Q&A portion. As a reminder to participate, just type your question into the text box located to the right of the presentation window, or click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If we don't have time for all the questions submitted today, we'll be sure to share them with our speakers who can reply to you offline. Okay, so let's get right into it. Our first question here comes from Charles, who wants to know, how can I drum up more use of the self-service portal? How can I get them to come?
I can take that. We're seeing a little bit of benefit out of that now. A lot of it, at least for me and what I've seen actually in other places that I've been at too, is I don't think that people necessarily have the faith that when they put in a request that it's going to get taken care of quickly and easily. And so they reach out to people to get stuff done for them. If you can build a process and show people, how easy it is to get a request and get it fulfilled, they will share that information with others. You can do a lot of, corporate communication work, but until people actually see it, they won't believe it. I had a request the other day that came in. Somebody needed something immediately. They reached out to me. I showed them the form online. They filled it out, and it was, fulfilled fairly quickly. You gotta promote it, and don't be the person that is the go around. Force them back to it. Teach people how to use the system, but make sure that it works. And it works well.
Great advice. This question comes from Humberto, who wants to know, what basic roadmap would you recommend to digitally transform the traditional service desk?
I can tell you that we don't have a specific roadmap. This is brand new to us in 2023, our digital transformation. We're actually working with a group of consultants that we've kicked off on just recently to enable it. But internally, our focus is, like I had mentioned, really improving our operational layer and then looking to optimize with technology enhancements or different systems, middleware, things like that, other technology that's going to improve us over time. But I'm a big proponent of before we do the technology, let's let's fix ourselves inside, let's fix our processes and what we do, our workflows, because you can have a great tool, but if your processes aren't in place or operating at an efficient level, the tool is just a waste.
And one thing I can add to this, again, we have the benefit of working with many, many, many different industries and customers. And I think the consistent theme that we see for the most successful organizations is focus. And what I mean by that is looking at the data you do have. They look at their data and they say, okay, where are the biggest pain points from a service perspective? Where do we get the majority of our requests? Where are people spending the majority of their time? Then look at how do we reduce those? And you've got a bunch of tools at your disposal, right? You have better workflow, you have automation, you have self-service content, and really looking at those tools and saying, okay, what's reasonable to implement? But let's focus on just a handful of things that are common pains. Because if there's a universally loathed process from a customer and an agent perspective, that's a great place to start, because once you fix it, everyone's excited about it, and that gives momentum to do more. Where we see organizations struggle is when they take the boil the ocean approach, where it's like, okay, we have all this opportunity, let's try to do it all at once and inflict, I use that word purposely, inflict change across everyone in our organization, right? Without necessarily having some of those changes be incredibly valuable in the mind of those who are involved in that process. So I think that focus on acute, mutually agreed upon pain has been a common denominator for the most successful organizations we've seen.
What's interesting, Andrew, if I can just piggyback on that, one of the things that I think we've also learned is, and this has been over, throughout my career, I've always noticed that companies don't always leverage the system in its entirety. Whatever technology offering that they do have, I've always noticed throughout my entire career that, you dig in a little deeper into a system, people are like, oh, I didn't really realize we could do that, or I didn't realize this automation existed. And I have a project right now for my team in which we are analyzing the full capabilities of each of our systems and our technology, because if we're not using it, what's the alternative? I mean, sometimes you think you need a Rolls Royce when you really just need a Honda Civic to get the work done. And it goes in mindset with projects, minimum viable product. But again, analyzing, what your systems are and what can they really do for you, I think is something that's missed often.
Great. Thank you all for that. This question from Valentine, who asks, what technologies or approach have you used to have users adopt self-service more?
I haven't used anything, but I'm really waiting for the day that I can have a chat bot that at least directs people and get some basic information to the right person. Not quite there yet, but that's what I'm looking for.
To Mark's point, we're also we're looking at a complete strategy around our communications with our customers, our call center, things like that. So chat bots, an improved phone system, IVR, everything related to that is very, very important to us. We're getting a lot of important NPS data from that area, so that's a focus right now.
And I would add in, when you think about conversational AI, it's one of those tools, but the foundation needs to be strong. So what we have seen is, once again, the organizations that do really well with conversational AI have a very solid knowledge base, right? They may have implemented a process like KCS, knowledge-centered service. That is something I highly recommend, because it helps develop a system and a culture around building knowledge as a means to reduce the burden on IT staff. Once you have that in place, then the focus on what are the most painful things and the most commonly requested things that drain our resources or provide a negative customer experience that we could self-serve. And then focusing that conversational AI initiative on making sure that we have the intents. So in conversational AI speak, you have intents, which is essentially something the conversational AI platform knows. Like, I'll give you an example, easy. Password reset, that could be an intent. Now, an utterance is how somebody asks that, whether that be voice or something they put in via a chatbot. Whatever that text is the utterance. And what the natural language processing does is match those things. And it says, I don't know my password. It says, I'm 95% confident that means password reset. And then there is a clear piece of knowledge to help that individual. So the foundation of knowledge, but then make sure that the conversational AI training strategy focuses on that low-hanging fruit, right? Be really good at the things where there's tons of volume, right? And then move on to expand that footprint. We've seen that. You can probably tell I have a theme here. Focus, focus, focus. We've seen the best organizations do that.
That's great advice. Keep the questions coming. This one from Lloyd, who asks, and I guess this is directed at you, Andrew.
Okay.
How does this compare to something like ServiceNow?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So, there's a lot of commonality, right? We're service management platforms. I think where the big differentiator is we have a completely different business model. Our customer is a customer who needs enterprise capabilities, right? They need advanced workflow. They need service portals. They need the foundation for conversational AI. They manage incident problems and change. But there's two things that set them apart from a ServiceNow customer. The first is that there might be varying levels of maturity, and they're looking for a product that helps them level up, right? They're looking for something to mature into. The more important part is that what we're finding is that customers, especially in anywhere from enterprise through the mid-market, they're becoming fatigued with products that require dedicated FTE. So whereas you need 10 software developers to maintain and expand your service management platform, they're taking a look in the mirror and saying, you know what, that's not where we want to put our resources. We would like people who aren't software developers to be able to own and maintain this application. So enterprise needs, but they don't want to dedicate full-time FTE, right? Or they don't want to have consultants 6, 8, 12, 24 months on the job. There's a great fit. So I think ServiceNow is a great product for a Fortune 100 company who has centralized IT. If I can dedicate 25 plus software developers to that platform and I have very complex needs, it's a great platform. That's not our customer, right? Our customer says, hey, I have similar needs. I just don't want to have the administrative requirement for that platform.
Okay, thanks a lot. Keep the questions coming. We do have a ton of them in the queue, by the way. This one from Luke, who asks, what advice do you give for improving the onboarding process? We talked a lot about onboarding today.
I think the best one is you got to, the person that's trying to improve the process, right? Get in there and do it. See how hard it is, and then figure out, what really is required. The onboarding process that we had here prior, there was a lot of extra stuff that wasn't needed, and I think, it was done. Somebody did something that may have made sense 6, 7 years ago, and it kept being done. Stuff changes. The business needs change. IT changes, right? Find out what's needed today. Build a process around that, and make sure that you include the teams that that are part of that. We worked hand in hand with our HR group on onboarding. We created a weekly call with them so that we were in lockstep for every user that was coming on board. We learned a lot through that process for 2 or 3 months before I actually built out the workflow. And then once we built the workflow, we refined it, quite a bit over the last year. That's one of those things is get in there and just find out what's really needed. and really understand the process, how hard it can be in some systems, and then look at it and say, how can it be simpler?
You love it's always been done this way. We've always done it that way.
Yeah.
My wife just had that at work the other day. It's great. So it's still happening. I think we really answered this question already. Let me go to this one. This one comes from Nella, who wants to know, does TeamDynamix offer services to implement, and how long does it take to be up and running?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I think one thing that differentiates us again is our business model, where we don't rely on consulting partners to implement. Our goal is to provide white glove services that help a client become successful with the software. We are successful as an organization if our clients love the software and buy more software. When you look at a software company that leverages a lot of business partners, those business partners' goal is to drive lots and lots of hours that they bill for, right? And that's a totally different type of ecosystem than the one we've created. So we offer professional services with a focus of let's be very efficient and effective, because if we do a great job and our customers are up and running quickly at as low a cost as possible from a services perspective, that's good for us, right, as an organization. So as far as the timeline goes, that really varies on the customer. The actual work to set up and configure the software is just a couple weeks, but typically it's going to take longer than that because customers have to get processes decided upon. We don't often find customers who have every single process nailed down. They would like some assistance with that. So it's going to take 4 to 6 months typically. But again, the actual work on the software doesn't take that long. It's mostly the internal process discussions that customers have.
Sure. So this question, and keep them coming, please. This one from Evan, who wants to know, what types of resources do I need to make changes? For instance, a new form or a new field for a service for HR. Can they do that, or do you need IT to get involved?
For TeamDynamix, if as part of that onboarding, there's keep me honest here, Andrew. It's a week-long set of classes that walk you through the entire configuration. There is a method to look, to watch those later on. But if you can go through those classes in a week, you're good to go. You should be able to make changes in the system. You may not need to know how somebody else has done something prior in your system, but it's very easy to learn. I didn't actually go through the classes. I watched the webinars afterwards. I wish I had gone through the classes. It took me a little bit longer because didn't have the opportunity, watching those webinars to ask questions. But once I got to, I can't remember the exact title, but the person I was working with on the implementation, we were banging stuff out left and right every week. It went quick. So.
Great. This one from Dan, who says, we get a variety of different requests through the service management. What do you recommend to start first to automate? And I think, you touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, I'm the guy that's going to take the hardest one and figure it out, because everything else gets easy. That's me. In some cases there might be some low-hanging fruit and stuff that you can do quickly, but I'm going to figure out the hardest one first. That's
okay.
That's how I'm going to feel about it.
That's great.
I think again, I just go back to the value that the automation creates. Right? When we find something that is loathed universally, both internally and from customers, that we can automate, that's a good place to start. I mean, if you can fix a problem that everyone agrees is a problem, it's a big win when that gets fixed. And then it creates momentum. And by the way, people are learning along the way. So the next one you do is easier, and the next one you do is easier, and the next one you do is easier.
So guys, you've been great, but we're running out of time. Any words of wisdom before we wrap this up for today?
We talk a lot about this stuff, from a technical perspective, but the one thing you remember, it's all about customer service. Get your processes and stuff in order that serves the business. if you do that, people will come.
I echo that. I mean, we're focused on process excellence. Like I said, 2023 is our year of the process. We're in the middle of implementing TeamDynamix now. We're very excited about, automating our workflows, utilizing iPaaS, using our ITSM to improve our service across the board. So we are focusing, again, just on our process, not just, with TeamDynamix, but just overall our entire enterprise. We just want to make sure that we remove any sort of delays or non-value-added steps and things like that, just to deliver the best experience and product and service to our customers.
Yeah, I completely agree with both what Mark and Roger said, and I guess the only thing I would add, I probably sound like a broken record, is just use the data you have, your existing ticket data, to really focus in where are the biggest pain points, right? What can we do to make the biggest impact initially? And that's usually a good place to start.
And with that, Andrew, Mark, and Roger, Information Week really appreciates the time and expertise you've offered us today on this topic. And for those of you who we didn't get to your questions, we will get the questions to our presenters to get a written response to you afterwards. Thanks to our sponsor, TeamDynamix, as well as to everyone in the audience. We appreciate your time and attention and participation. And within the next 24 hours, you'll receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Please feel free to invite your colleagues and peers who may have not been able to listen to the event live. This webinar is copyright 2023 by Informa. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Information Week and TeamDynamix, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests, TeamDynamix, I'm Michael Krieger. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.